Hello everyone, and thanks for joining. I present today on the topic, what are switching costs and how can they be influenced by intellectual property, IP? Let's start with a simple example to illustrate the concept of switching costs. Imagine there's a company that is using an ERP system for years. The system is deeply integrated in the workflows of the company. One day, the company decides to switch to a new ERP system, which promises better efficiency. This switch from the present ERP system to a new one will not come without costs. On the one hand, there will be direct financial costs, for example, for purchasing or licensing the new ERP system or upgrading the hardware infrastructure. On the other hand, there will be non-monetary costs, for example, the time and the resources needed for training the employees to use the new system. All of these costs, whether monetary or non-monetary, for switching from a present product or brand supplier service to a new brand supplier service is what is referred to as switching costs. And from an economic point of view, it is important to understand that switching costs can be a source of competitive advantage because they can influence all of the so-called Porter's five forces. I will come back to this aspect at the end of the presentation again. To benefit from such competitive advantage, which is based on switching cost, there are some general recommendations. First, companies should try to create high switching costs to establish the basis for a competitive advantage, as well as pricing power. Pricing power is because the less inclined customers are to switch, the higher the pricing power of the seller. And second, and this is in particular relevant from an IP point of view, you should strategically leverage intellectual property rights to either create or enhance switching costs, because this can make the competitive advantage sustainable. Let's move to a practical example to further illustrate the concept of switching costs. And here I would like to focus on the Tonybox, which is a children audio player. As I don't know whether you're familiar with this product, I would like to briefly introduce it to you. The story of the Tonybox started in 2013. The two founders, by the way, from Düsseldorf, had young kids and they were looking for alternative audio systems. They were somehow frustrated with the existing ones, for example, with traditional CDs, which can get scratches, or with digital offerings such as Spotify, which are not always suitable for young kids. Their vision was to have a very easy to use, intuitive, robust, and screen-free audio system. And this vision resulted 2016 in the launch of the Tonybox, which you see on the left, and the Tony figures, which you see on the right. But what is special about the Tonybox? Well, in my point of view and also experience, it's the simplicity of use. So all you have to do is take the Tony figure, put it on the Tonybox, and the story or music immediately starts. If you put it off, the story ends. If you want to increase the volume, you press the bigger ear of the Tonybox, and if you want to decrease the volume, you press the smaller ear. And the functions are so simple that even very young kids understand them extremely quickly. But how does it work technically? Let's have a short look at some pattern drawings. So each Tony figure has an RFID chip, number 113 in figure 4. And this chip acts as an identifier for the respective story or music. The Tonybox itself has a built-in sensor which is able to read this RFID chip once the Tony is placed on the box. And if the RFID chip is identified, the Tonybox will automatically download the content via the cloud from a server. The content is then stored in the memory of the Tonybox. And one advantage of the setup is that once the content is stored in the Tonybox, the kids can listen to the content anywhere without need of an internet connection. And this interaction ensures a very simple, interactive, and user-friendly experience for the kids. Let's now have a look at the more IP strategic aspects, in particular how switching costs are influenced. And here again, we should start by summarizing the USPs, the unique selling propositions of the Tony box, because they are of key importance for the whole concept. This is, again, that the Tony box is a child-friendly, screen-free product, very robust and easy to use. And the Tony figures enhance this user experience. And already based on these USPs, the switching costs are significant, because once customers invested in a Tony box and a collection of Tonys, the costs, both monetary but also emotional, of switching to different system become substantial. The business strategy behind is a differentiation strategy that is based on the USPs. And the IP strategy is a value-added monopoly strategy, which means that it is tried to get exclusivity for the key features of the product. And in the case of the Tony box, this means that the Tony box and the Tonys are broadly protected, in particular by patents, but also by other IP rights, such as designs or trademarks. But how does IP protection enhance the switching costs and affects Porter's 5 forces? In this regard, I would like to focus on 3 key aspects: patents, brand equity, and exclusive copyright contents. Let's start with patents. As mentioned before, that patents protect more or less all functional key aspects and user benefits of the Tony box. So, for example, the toy figure and its interaction with the box are protected. The simple operating functions, like increasing or decreasing of the volume, are protected. And by the way, in my view, this also is a clear IP design approach, which means that the company proactively protected these features with IP. So it's not by coincidence, no way. And the impact of this IP protection certainly is that there is a temporary monopoly on the features, on the USPs, and this blocks imitation and also limits the numbers of competitors. And very important in my view also is that third-party offerings of toy figures that could be interoperable with the Tony box are blocked due to the patent protection. And this allows a lock-in of customers, this IP protection concept, but also the charging of premium prices. And the effect on switching costs is certainly strong, as customers may find it costly and difficult to switch to competitor products as they cannot offer the same patented USPs. Then another aspect is brand equity. So the company behind Tony box managed to build up a strong trademark protected brand equity, which is primarily built on the USPs, but also on aspects like targeted marketing, retail partnerships, and strong customer support. In addition, this is also enhanced by the really good design of the Tony box, which also won design awards. And the impact of this brand equity is a strong brand loyalty and also a growing community, which, by the way, results in strong positive network externalities, which means additional benefits due to the growing community, which, for example, allows kids to easily swap Tonys amongst each other. Also, this brand equity aspect has a strong effect on switching costs, in particular based on strong customer loyalty. Finally, there are partly exclusive copyrights contents or licenses to content. This also strengthens the USP and has an impact on the switching costs, at least for those customers who value these exclusive contents. Finally, the switching costs also have an effect on the so-called 5 forces, at least on 4 of these 5 forces. That's because the switching costs reduce the bargaining power of the customers, the threat of new entrants, of substitutes, and ultimately they also reduce the competitive rivalry within the industry. And thus, as a takeaway, the example of the Tony box shows how, by the strategic use of intellectual property, you can not only create or enhance the switching costs, but in particular, you can create a competitive advantage that is sustainable. Many thanks for your attention and have a good day.